You enter a town, looking for directions. You approach the closest person and find... If you're like me, you generally go for an enterprising young boy or girl that probably dabbles in pickpocketing and knows the right people to get stuff done. This works, but you can't rely on the same trick all the time. So what other people might the party meet upon entering the town? Let's take this as an opportunity to draw inspiration from some of the forgotten and less desirable jobs that used to exist. If you're writing a story, some of these might make an interesting jobs for your NPCs, or jobs for your protagonist to perform before their hero's journey. In TTRPGs, these could be things your characters did before the call to adventure. One of my favorite D&D characters was a Battlemaster fighter called Bolt, who spent most of his life as a rat catcher. Fair warning here, some of these jobs are pretty gross, but what's more realistic than talking to someone covered in dirt and grime? You approach the closest person and find a rat catcher, a young man with several dead rats tied to a rope. He is on his way to the butcher to sell the meat, and then to the tanner for the hides. A poop collector, with 2 buckets of mostly dog poo and a small shovel. He is on his way out of town to the tanner to deliver his buckets. A leech collector. Fresh from the nearby stream, the woman is sitting on a log with easily a dozen leeches attached to her legs. As they finish feeding and drop off, she catches them in a jar, ready to sell. A trash collector. A young boy is pushing a wheelbarrow filled with discarded food, torn rags, broken bits of wood, and crockery. He's heading to the local dump where he'll unload his barrow and head back into town. A Tosher, or sewer Fossicker. He stinks, freshly emerged from the sewers after sifting through sewage for anything of value. He has a small bucket filled with things that he'll try to sell or barter after cleaning them off. A water deliverer. Pushing a wheelbarrow with several small barrows, half of them filled with water, he's on his way to various houses to deliver the water barrels. For multi-story buildings, he'll even carry them all the way up the flights of stairs to the top floor. A street crosser, a young boy with a small white rag tied to a stick. People pay him a copper to walk out into the street to stop traffic so they can safely cross. A trash fossicker, a young boy carrying a small bucket filled with items he was able to find in trash heaps, mostly things that could be remade, fixed, or traded. A guide. For a copper, he'll take you where you need to go in town and travel around the less desirable or dangerous parts. A plague bearer. His cart is filled with bodies of the deceased on his way to the cremation pyre. A sin eater. An ugly man munching on the last remnant of a loaf of bread. He's just come from a funeral where the loaf was placed on the deceased in order to absorb their sins. He is then paid a small sum to eat the food and take on their sins. A rag and bone man. A dishevelled man with a bag filled with scraps of cloth, glass, and animal bones that he's scavenged. He'll sell them to various traders, with cloth used to make things like cardboard, and the animal bone and glass ground down and placed into things like mortar. A treadwheeler. A middle-aged man sitting on the ground with his legs splayed. He has spent the last few hours walking on a cylindrical treadmill that is used to grind wheat. Tiring work. He's sitting because of the physical demand of his job. A body snatcher. A man pulling a cart with what appears to be a body under a sheet. He is delivering it to a nearby doctor to conduct an educational autopsy. Sometimes this work was illegal, other times important part of training and educating people on anatomy. A grave robber. A man with a shovel and bags of items he's recently separated from the dead. Jewels, gold teeth, anything that he can claim from the body. A gong farmer. This man has dried feces on his pants, and his cart is filled with similar but wet. He's just come from emptying septic tanks in the nearby tavern. Incredibly dangerous work and often looked down upon, he is a necessary part of keeping the town toilets operational. A match seller. A young girl holding a basket with boxes of matches. She also has some lighters and older style matches. Quick note here, the first match was created in ancient China around 600 AD. Alchemists created the first sulfur matches, small sticks of pine wood that were coated in sulfur and used to transport fire from one source to another. In other words, they were not self-lighting, but they could easily be lit off one source of flame and then used to light another. The first self-igniting matches were created in 1805. Jean Chancel, a French chemist, invented the first self-igniting match by dipping a splint tipped with a mixture of potassium chloride, sulfur, sugar, gum arabic into a small asbestos bottle filled with sulfuric acid. This is not an ignition match, rather it was a chemical ignition. The first lighter was invented in 1823 by a German chemist, Johann Wolfgang Dobereiner, also known as Dobereiner's lamp. The first friction matches were invented in 1826 by British chemist John Walker. He accidentally discovered the first friction match when he scraped a stick coated with a mixture of chemicals against a rough surface, igniting the head. These early friction matches contained antimony sulfide, potassium chlorate, and gum arabic. Next, we have a costermonger, or fruit seller. A young woman with a cart with a dozen or so pieces of fruit, crab apples mostly, with some cherries, plums, potatoes, and carrots. She's come from a fruit wholesaler and gets a cut for every piece she sells. A lime burner. This man is caked in soot and has light burns across his arms and face. He has just finished superheating lime and seashells to be used in mortar, paint, and leather tanning. This was incredibly dangerous work with toxic fumes and heat. A knocker-upper. A young woman with a large stick. She's been walking around town waking up her customers for work. A lector. An older woman with a basket of several small books. She reads the books to factory workers to keep them entertained. A charcoal burner. Covered in soot and with a barrel of charcoal, he is on the way to the smith's. Charcoal was an important fuel for metalwork. In order to get charcoal, a large mound or pyre of wood was formed, mostly buried in earth with small holes to allow the charcoal burner to control how much oxygen was placed in, and then ignited. Charcoal burners often lived near their pyres because it required constant attention and would burn for several days. To wrap up, immersion comes not from a complex economic system or explaining the production line of steel to your players, but from glimpses into that system. Seeing a person driving a delivery truck or people packing shelves at the supermarket is often enough to give you a sense of the massive distribution lines that allow us to live our everyday lives. These are the jobs that keep society turning. They make it real. Next time you players walk into a town and you have to pick an NPC, think of some of the weird things that might be going on in this town. Some of the jobs of the people on the edges of society. These are not going to be the people who are selling potions or magic items to your players, but they might be the ones that know what's going on. Thanks for listening to this episode of GMspiration. Remember to have fun.